He thought he had it all: family, fame, and a career on track. But then he said one word, just one word, and it all came crashing down. Now, every move he makes is a betrayal, and his own people are the ones hunting him down. The worst part? This isn't just a fight for survival anymore. It's a battle between who he's supposed to be and who he's becoming. And what's coming next? That's the part no one's ready for. It was the kind of silence that could choke a person, the kind where even the air felt thick, like it was waiting for something to happen. Every single person in that CNN studio was holding their breath as Bill Maher, yes, the Bill Maher, the king of comedy and controversy, sat across from John, the host of the show. John, 35, a sharp-tongued journalist, known for cutting people off mid-sentence if they weren't playing his game, gripped the microphone like it was a lifeline. He had his next question ready, but something in the air told him this interview was about to take a left turn into madness, and sure enough, Bill Maher didn't disappoint. "Hold on, John," Maher interrupted, waving him off like he was a fly buzzing around his face. "Let's talk about Trump." Boom! The words hit the room like a grenade. For a second, you could almost hear the collective gasp as the tension shot through the studio like electricity. What the hell just happened? People exchanged looks like they were wondering if they were still on the same planet. This was Bill Maher we were talking about, the guy who had roasted Trump more times than anyone could count, and now here he was, defending him. John froze. He'd been hosting these kinds of shows for years, and he knew how to control the narrative. He could shut down any guest who didn't play by the rules. But this was different. Bill, what do you mean?" John's voice cracked a little. The confidence that had been there seconds ago was gone, replaced by a growing sense of panic. He wasn't just dealing with some off-the-cuff comment now. No, Maher had just slapped the hornet's nest, and things were about to get ugly. Bill Maher stood up, casually adjusting his jacket like he had all the time in the world. His tone was calm, but you could feel the fire behind it. "Listen, you want me to condemn the guy for what he's done? Why? Just because of his words? I get it, he's not perfect. None of us are. But you know what? He's human. And yeah, maybe he messed up a lot of things, but hell, we all do." The room went dead silent. You could almost hear the clack of keyboards as social media exploded in real time. What the hell is happening? Is this a joke? Bill Maher, the Trump apologist? Every word Maher spoke was like lighting a fuse on a time bomb, and now it was ticking down to something catastrophic. Suddenly, on the screen above, a graphic popped up. War of Words, Bill Maher versus CNN. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The words were bold, jarring. This was the moment that would define everything to come. John's face twisted, his usual composure slipping. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, his voice laced with disbelief, but underneath it, pure panic. "Bill, you're actually defending him?" Bill Maher laughed, that familiar sardonic grin spreading across his face. "I'm not defending him, John. I'm just saying, maybe the guy doesn't deserve to be the punching bag everyone's making him out to be. There's a difference." At that, one of the younger guests, some hotshot political analyst from New York, trying way too hard to make his mark on the show, burst out. "Are you out of your mind, Bill? Are you seriously saying you get him? What, you've got some insider scoop that we don't know about?" Maher looked at him, raising an eyebrow, the smirk never leaving his face. "Oh, come on. You're the one who's out of your depth here. You don't get it, do you?" he scoffed. "You think this is just about politics? It's about the system. It's about what's wrong with how we treat people. You want to cancel him? Fine, but good luck fixing everything else in the process." That was it. That was the moment the world caught fire. The studio, already on edge, seemed to grow even colder. The cameras panned across the room, showing the looks of complete disbelief on the faces of the other guests. There was no going back from this. Bill Maher wasn't just stirring the pot. He was flipping the table, and CNN, for all its years of controlling narratives, was suddenly out of control. John tried to regain his composure, but you could see it in his eyes. He wasn't prepared for this kind of confrontation. This wasn't just about a hot take or a clever jab. It was personal now. "What are you even talking about, Bill?" John managed, his voice still shaky. This is insane. You're saying we just forget everything and..." Bill cut him off. I'm saying, John, that maybe we should start thinking for ourselves instead of just going along with whatever the media or Twitter says. Ever think about that? The tension in the air was palpable. John was clearly struggling to keep his cool, but the more Bill spoke, the more he felt like he was losing control of his own show. And in that split second, Bill Maher wasn't just a guest anymore. He was the storm, and CNN? Well, it was the eye of it, totally unprepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. But the thing is, this wasn't just a shocker for the studio. No, this was the kind of moment that goes viral. As Bill continued to challenge John, as he dropped each sarcastic, pointed comment, the digital world was already exploding with opinions. People were calling it the most insane thing to happen on TV this year. The comment sections were lighting up with hashtags like #MaherVsCNN and #BillMaher on Unfiltered trending across every platform. And yet, through all this chaos, one thing was clear. Maher had just pulled a trigger no one expected. And now, the fallout? It was going to be epic. Bill Maher wasn't about to back down. As the minutes dragged on, he kept going, doubling down on his defensive trump. Every word out of his mouth was like a grenade exploding, detonating one illusion after another. The whole room was on edge, each breath more tense than the last. It felt like the walls were closing in. If you could hear the rustling of thoughts, it was the sound of disbelief. The tone was shifting. Fast. Bill was dropping bombs about media censorship, the real reasons behind political maneuvering, and how the masses were being manipulated without even realizing it. Every time he spoke, the tension in the studio ratcheted up another notch. John, ever the self-assured host, tried to regain control and failed spectacularly. He was supposed to be the one running the show, but now he was playing catch-up. His attempts to steer the conversation felt weak, almost desperate. The camera caught every flicker of anger, confusion, and panic that crossed his face. It wasn't just the show that was unraveling, it was his grip on the entire narrative. Bill Maher wasn't just saying things for shock value. He wasn't trying to be the loudest guy in the room, or even the most controversial. No, he was speaking from a place that felt like it was coming from the core of his very being. It wasn't just politics to him anymore. It was something much deeper, much darker. His voice wasn't just about defending Trump. It was about tearing down the very fabric of everything people thought they knew. You think the media gives a damn about truth? Bill shot back, looking right at John, his voice cutting through the tension like a hot knife. It's all about control. They play on your fears, your insecurities. You think this political circus is about you and me? Nay, man, it's about them. They tell us what to think, how to feel, and when to say we've had enough. It's not about policy. It's about power. John's face was turning red now, frustration bubbling up under the surface. Bill, this is insane. You're seriously defending a guy who's been nothing but trouble. He's wrecked everything. Bill cut him off, unbothered. Oh, give me a break. This isn't about Trump, John. It's about the system that made a guy like him possible. You can blame him all you want, but you're missing the bigger picture. He didn't even flinch. The words came at lightning speed, like he was firing from the hip, with no fear of the consequences. It was like a game of tug-of-war, and Bill was pulling with everything he had. He wasn't just defending Trump anymore. He was tearing apart the whole narrative. The audience was stuck in the middle, unsure whether to side with Bill's truth-bombing or go back to the safe, familiar outrage they were used to. John's mind was clearly scrambling. His attempts to steer Bill back to safer waters were failing. Every comment Bill made was like a slap to the face, and there was no turning back now. The air in the studio felt like it was charged with static, ready to blow at any second. This was no longer just an interview. It was a war of words, and Bill Maher was going all in. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Bill dropped the next bombshell that would send the internet into an absolute frenzy. "I'll meet with Trump," he said, his voice unwavering. "One-on-one. No media filters, no talking points. Just me and him, face to face. I want to talk to him directly. I want to understand why. I want to hear it from him, not from CNN, not from Fox. Just us." The entire studio froze. You could feel the collective gasp ripple through the room. Bill Maher, the guy who had spent years ripping Trump apart on his show, was willing to meet with him, willing to sit down with the very person he had roasted on stage for years. The faces of the guests around the table drained of color. Cameras shook slightly as they zoomed in on Bill's face, capturing every single word. What the hell was happening? Was this some kind of sick joke? How could Bill, of all people, want to sit across from the man everyone had deemed a walking disaster? But Bill wasn't playing games. There was something in his eyes, something deeper. He wasn't just trying to stir the pot for ratings. This was about something more profound, more personal. You could tell he was wrestling with his own demons, questioning the very narrative that had defined him. Was he really just a liberal puppet, spouting the same lines everyone else did? Or was there something more to this whole political circus? As the seconds ticked by, John's disbelief turned into outright frustration. He slammed his hand down on the desk, his voice now sharp and accusing. "What are you trying to prove, Bill? Are you saying that you get him? You think you can fix this?" Bill didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to fix anything, John. I'm trying to understand, and that's a lot more than you're willing to do. You think I'm the bad guy here? Well, maybe I am, but at least I'm asking the questions you're too scared to even touch." John's jaw tightened. The studio was about to explode, and he knew it. The stakes had been raised. Bill Maher wasn't just going for the shock value anymore. He was challenging the very structure of the political machine, and in doing so, he was forcing everyone to face the uncomfortable truth. This wasn't just about Trump. It wasn't even about Bill Maher. This was about something much bigger. Bill had lit the fuse, and now the countdown was on. People were watching, waiting to see how far he would go. Would he meet with Trump? Was he really this defiant, this hell-bent on shaking the very foundation of the political game? The questions hung in the air, unanswered. And as the show wound down, one thing was crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. Bill Maher had opened a door, and now the world was about to find out what lay on the other side. The studio lights flickered out the moment the broadcast was cut, but the storm was far from over. No one had seen this coming, and now the internet was on fire. Bill Maher's name was everywhere, trending on every platform, plastered across headlines like a bomb waiting to detonate. His shocking defense of Trump, something that would have been unthinkable just days ago, was now the talk of the town. Social media went off. The comments were ruthless. Some cheered, others tore him apart. People who once idolized him for his biting political humor now felt betrayed. It was like watching a public figure walk off the edge of a cliff, and everyone was hanging on the edge of their seats, wondering whether he'd splatter or soar. "Dude, what the hell is he thinking?" one tweet read. "Bill Maher's gone full bonkers. I thought he was supposed to be better than this." But it wasn't just the fans and trolls online. Media outlets jumped on the bandwagon too. Every major news channel scrambled to dissect Bill's statements. The debate raged like wildfire, but as the pressure mounted, one thing became clear. CNN, the very network that had given Bill a platform, was now looking for a way to distance itself. Behind the scenes, CNN execs were furiously making calls. They were furious, scrambling to figure out how to spin this disaster. Bill Maher's contract was on the line. They needed to get him under control, fast. But Bill wasn't having it. He was out there, like a one-man army, refusing to back down. His Instagram and Twitter feeds exploded with support from Trump supporters and regular folks alike, all telling him they backed him up. In a world where public opinion could make or break you, Bill was standing tall, taking the heat and pushing forward with his message. "You know, it's not about Trump," Bill tweeted late one night after hours of media firestorms. "It's about the system. The game is rigged, and I'm not playing by anyone's rules but my own. If you can't see that, then you're just part of the problem." The backlash was insane. People didn't just criticize Bill anymore, they attacked him. News anchors were practically salivating at the chance to bury him. It wasn't just about his defense of Trump anymore. The real issue was this: Bill Maher was willing to challenge everything. He wasn't playing nice, he wasn't fitting the mold, and that was terrifying to the powers that be. Then came the inevitable. CNN had to make a call. They had no choice but to seriously consider whether they wanted to continue working with Bill. His statements were blowing up everything they stood for, and the network's bosses knew that this kind of heat wasn't something they could easily recover from. Bill, on the other hand, wasn't backing down. He was going full throttle. He was gaining a following, but at the same time, losing friends. Those old friends who had once laughed along with his jokes, now shaking their heads in disappointment. Those who had supported him in the past suddenly began to pull away. They couldn't handle his new stance. And the worst part, Bill knew this would happen. Deep down, he knew the personal cost of standing up for what he believed in. Despite the pressure, despite the looming possibility of losing everything, Bill made a decision. He was going to meet with Trump. Yes, he was going to do it. The entire world was watching, and Bill Maher was about to meet the man who had been the target of his sharpest jabs. The public thought they knew him. They thought he was the guy who couldn't wait to tear down everything Trump stood for. But now, he was ready to face him, face to face. No cameras, no talking points. Just a man looking another man in the eye and figuring out why it had all gotten so damn messy. The media went wild. The storm that had already been raging turned into a hurricane. People who had once rallied around Bill now turned on him. He's lost his mind, they said. He's betraying everything he stood for. The accusations started flying. Bill Maher's a traitor, they shouted. He's sold out to the other side. Friends were dropping out of his circle. Those who had cheered for him in the past now threw him under the bus, afraid of being associated with someone who dared to challenge the status quo. The message was clear. Bill was crossing a line. And maybe, just maybe, he was too far gone to come back. But here's where it gets complicated. Bill didn't care. The deeper he sank into this quagmire, the more he realized something profound. This wasn't about Trump. This wasn't even about CNN or the media or political allegiances. It was about him. It was about Bill Maher fighting with his own demons. Am I doing the right thing? He would wonder in the quiet moments when the world wasn't watching. Am I really betraying my values? Or am I just trying to understand something bigger than what I've been told? The more the battle raged, the more Bill came to terms with the fact that his real fight wasn't with Trump or CNN or anyone else. It was about with himself. His belief systems were being torn apart in front of his eyes, and he couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. There was a line somewhere between what the world expected from him and what he really wanted to say. He had always made a career out of tearing down sacred cows, laughing at the world's absurdities. But now, the joke was on him. He was the one standing in the spotlight, exposed, and the truth was, he wasn't sure what to do with it. Who's really pulling the strings, he'd think, late at night? Who's manipulating us all? The path ahead was unclear. The moment he'd stepped into the spotlight, he had shattered the illusions of who he thought he was, and who everyone else thought he should be. He was no longer just a comedian, no longer just a political commentator. He was something much bigger, much more vulnerable, and it scared the hell out of him. But here's the kicker. Even though he was being torn apart by the very people who used to cheer for him, Bill Maher was also becoming something else. He was becoming the man who had the guts to question the system, even when it was destroying him. Whether that would lead to his fall or his rise remained to be seen. If I were in Bill Maher's shoes, I'd probably feel the pressure. Standing up for what you believe in can cost you, but it's also the only way to stay true to yourself. It's tough when you risk losing support, but sometimes you gotta be real. I've been in situations where I had to make tough choices, even if it meant upsetting people. But at the end of the day, doing what feels right is more important than playing it safe. What would you do? Would you stand your ground or stay quiet? Let me know in the comments. Like if you agree, share if you think more people need to hear this, and comment if you've been in a similar spot. Your opinion matters. This story's here to shed light on tough choices and help make the world a little better.